welcome to Outside of a Cat. My name is James and I'm here at dearauthor.com for an article entitled Trope, actually, the 2024 Romance Writers of Australia Conference. We're in here reading this because Jack Bridges from Outside of a Cat is mentioned. So it's by Kaetrin. So this is Kaetrin speaking when she says I. The annual Romance Writers Australia Conference was held in my hometown of Adelaide over the weekend of 17th to 18th of August. So I had to go. It's the rules. There's a note here about the acronyms. I'm assuming she's a she, so my apology if she's not. I'm not an author and it is a writers' conference, so a lot of the presentations didn't apply to me precisely. But it was still interesting seeing a little bit of how the sausage is made, learning a few things about writing craft, and of course meeting authors, including Christina Lauren, yes really, BJ Daniels, Amy Barry and Anna Hackett, as well as re-meeting authors Rachel Johns. The Other Bridget will be released in the US in September, so I can finally tell you all about it, and Jodie McAllister, author of, among others, Here for the Right Reasons, in particular. Plus, I had a chance to catch up with people I'd met in the publishing industry and the blogosphere before, including Kate Cuthbert, co-host of the What Would Danbury Do podcast, which discusses all things Bridgerton, definitely recommended for fans of the show. For me, the conference kicked off with the book signing event, where I hobnobbed with authors and readers and collectors, signatures and swag, as you do. Pins are a tradition and culture at RWAus, so I got in the action and ended up with a lanyard covered in them, but this was my pride and joy. Tessa Bailey wasn't there, but this pin gave me Wells Whitaker Burgess Sir Savage Abraham vibes. Isn't she pretty? After the book signing was the welcome cocktail party, where guests were encouraged to come along dressed as their favourite trope. There were multitudes of runaway brides, various fake boyfriends, usually involving carrying a blow-up doll, single dads, fake beard and plastic baby in a carrier, billionaires, Christmas romance, office romance, moi, and one enterprising gentleman who came as a mediocre white guy among the crowd. Saturday morning, the conference kicked off in earnest with a welcome to country from a Kaurna man, pronounced Ghana, Robert Taylor, representing the Aboriginal people on whose land the conference was held. As Australia continues to grapple with the damage of colonialism and white settlement to First Nations people, it is increasingly common to include a welcome or acknowledgement of country, part of our efforts towards reconciliation. At my day job, I start off training sessions with a brief acknowledgement that we stand on Kaurna land and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. Robert's welcome to country was far more than that, though, gracious, educational and humorous as he shared a little about his culture and family. Then it was BJ Daniels talking about her journey to publishing, there to tell everyone it's never too late to become an author, having sold her first book at age 50. Speaking of 50, Harlequin Mills and Boone celebrated their 50th anniversary of operation in Australia and New Zealand this year, and the conference showcased the history of the publisher from all the way back in the UK and Canada to what it is today, followed by a panel discussion from HQ and Mills and Boone authors and Dr. Jodie McAllister, who knows all the romance history and has the PhD to prove it. AI was a big topic of discussion in the What's Hot and What's Not panel, featuring representatives from traditional romance publishers in Australia, but for the most part it's pretty obvious, at least at present, if AI has been used within a manuscript, and these submissions are quickly rejected. Apart from anything else, AI cannot be copyrighted, so authors and publishers need to be wary. I was pleased to see that audio originals and full cast recordings are hot, and to hear that listening to an audiobook is to reading. There's even science behind it, but as far as trends, the common theme was that the journey to publishing traditionally is so long that if someone is chasing a trend, it will likely be over by the time the book comes out. The overall message was to write the book that resonates with you. I went to the Christina Lauren panel because of course I did. They were delightful and funny and talked about how to co-write. Basically, it involves a high level of trust, open communication, similar ethics and goals, and a starting point of believing in the good intentions of the other person. Yes, they do finish each other's sentences. After that, I attended a panel on building emotional resonance in writing, which, even for this non-author, was fascinating. Then it was off to glam up for the Gala Awards dinner, where authors from Australia and New Zealand are celebrated based on reader vote for the Romantic Book of the Year, RWAus, and by author member panel for the other awards, including those for yet to be published authors. The winners are listed here. Sunday's crowd was understandably a little more subdued than Saturday's. Ilana Johnson gave a keynote talk about her journey in indie publishing, and then there was a panel where the international guest authors spilled the tea. I learned that Lauren started out writing fanfic of Days of Our Lives when she was 11. Hearing Jack and Jennifer and Patch and Kayla took me back. Afterwards, there were more panels on tropes and building character, on marketing and TikTok, on wills and legacies, with the conference wrapping up with Christina Lauren's keynote presentation, Tropes, HEA and Female Joy, How to Enjoy Longevity in Your Romance Career. Everyone was tired but happy and bubbling with new ideas by the end of the conference. That was all very fun, but I had a more serious mission going into the conference. There was a panel I had been particularly interested in, representation or appropriation. Just before lunch on Sunday, I had the pleasure of listening to a panel of authors, including Jack Bridges and Anita Heiss. Dr. Anita Heiss is the first Indigenous woman to be traditionally published in romantic comedy in Australia. Melody Selwood, with her novel Love Unleashed, which released in August this year, is only the second. Dr. Heiss, a University of Queensland professor and author of both fiction and non-fiction, is a publisher at large at Bundy Publishing, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. Jack Bridges is a disabled queer trans man who writes romantic and erotic fiction. He is also the chair of the RWA DEI Committee and a member of the RWA Committee and Conference Committee. The panel acknowledged publishing and romance is still mainly white, straight, cisgendered and able-bodied. That perennial question arose, should an author write from a perspective not their own? Dr. Heiss had a nuanced answer. Everyone does. She writes straight men all the time, and that's not her experience. But she knows straight men. They're in her life and have been for a long time. She interacts with them daily. Approximately 30% of the Australian population were born overseas. Dr. Heiss commented that living in Australia, if you're not interacting from people with diverse backgrounds every day, you need to get out more. She encouraged authors to write from their experience and the people around them to write what they know. Unspoken was to know the people around them. Is the depiction empowering or merely perpetuating stereotypes? She was careful to say that what she's asking from white authors is not to write First Nations main characters. Frankly, she'd very much prefer that to be left for First Nations authors, but to include First Nations characters in their stories. The hairdresser or the shop assistant, the lawyer or the teacher. Make them visible and show an authentic version of the contemporary world. Dr. Heiss also pointed authors to resources such as from the First Nations Australia Writers Network and Creative Australia to help non-Indigenous authors write respectful First Nation characters. Jack Bridges' message was mainly to those writing queer and especially trans characters. Be kind. He said that particularly trans kids need, especially now, gentle, loving stories. Authors who write from a queer perspective may be queer, they may be straight, or on a journey to understanding their own queerness, and writing a story opens a window in their own life. He shies away from assuming the sexuality or gender identity of the author or of demanding to know it. Of course, exploring queerness and sexuality in a novel is completely different to a white person exploring blackness in a novel. One is okay, the other not. Jack goes on to say that it's not just disability or gender identity, sexuality, race or ethnicity that writers need to consider. There are any number of biases and lenses we see things through that ought to be examined and possibly challenged. He suggests to consider privilege, stereotypes and prejudice in all the things. As for the role of publishing in including gender and sexual diversity, racial and ethnic diversity and better disability representation, well, maybe we need to change the gatekeepers. There's not a lot of that at present. Dr. Heiss hinted at an announcement later in the year, but for now it's mainly just her efforts at Bundy Yee Publishing to support First Nations creators, from authors to proofreaders, graphic artists and printers. After the panel, I spoke with Jack Bridges. Most everyone reading this knows that RWAus imploded over racism and bigotry. I asked him, as chairperson of the DEI committee, what was RWA Australia doing to avoid the same fate? He acknowledged it's a risk RWA Australia is only in the early stages of addressing. There has only even been a DEI committee for a couple of years. As he put it, doing just one thing was 100% improvement. Jack is vision impaired and spoke to me of the committee's efforts to make this conference accessible, with aisles marked clearly and a quiet space complete with colouring pages and fidget toys for delegates who were overwhelmed by the noise. It was loud pretty much all the time, or who just needed a quiet space away from the crowd. I spent a little time in the quiet room afterward, writing up my notes and taking in the glorious silence. I asked Jack what RWA Australia was doing to increase the diversity in the membership. We agreed that the attendees were predominantly white. Could RW Australia have a nice white ladies problem just like RWA US? Jack acknowledged it was possible, but also said he'd personally been made very welcome and had been treated well by all at the conference. But efforts to actively increase diversity in the organisation have to await the structures to support them, such as a code of conduct and grievance policy, a project which may take up to 2 years by the time the awards are drafted, run by the lawyers and then put to the membership at an AGM. As he said to me, we can't ask people to come unless we can show them they will be safe here. Will the membership balk at an influx of people from non-white, non-cis, non-straight and or disabled backgrounds? Jack and I looked around at the people attending the conference. Of the 400 or so people in attendance, just around a quarter of them were newbies, and of them, many of them were young. I commented that I'm heartened by the young people in my trans daughter's life, who have accepted her in every case without a blink. The alpha generation have grown up expecting diversity and accepting it. Whatever happens, Jack tells me, RWA Australia is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. It's going to take some time, but it will be done. The comparison between RWA Australia and RWA US is not direct. There is a vast difference in sheer population numbers, roughly 336 million to 27 million, and a difference in the cultural mix of the two places. As yet in Australia we don't have the same level of political tribalism, and my thinking is that had its own impact on RWA US. Still, both places are grappling with very similar issues. RWA US failed in its attempt. I wish for RWA Australia to have success. As I drove home from the Glenelg foreshore, I reflected on a comment one of the publishers said at a panel on the first day of the conference. Australia punches well above its weight when it comes to reading and writing. From all reports, the conference was a smashing success. the most well-attended one in, well, if not ever, a very long time, with the most newbies attending. Romance writing is flourishing in Australia. If the conference is anything to go by, and if it can build on the DEI start it has made, it has a bright future ahead. Kaetrin started reading romance as a teen and then took a long break, detouring into fantasy and thrillers. She returned to romance in 2008 and has been blogging since 2010. She reads contemporary, historical, a little paranormal, urban fantasy and romance suspense, as well as erotic romance and more recently new adult. She loves angsty books, funny books, long books and short books. The only thing mandatory is the HEA. Favourite authors including Mary Balloch, Susanna Kersley, Johanna Byrne, Tamara Webber, Kristen Ashley, Shannon Stacey, Sarah Maybury, J.D. Robb, Nora Roberts, K.A. Mitchell, Mari Sexton, Patricia Biggs, Ilona Andrews, just to name a few. You can find her on Twitter at Kaetrin67. And that article was published on August 23, 2024. Well, let us know what you think about that. If you went to the conference, write a comment below. If you'd like to talk about it, your experience at the conference, then contact us. Outside of a Cat is on YouTube and Facebook. We appreciate everyone who watches our videos, so please like, share, comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.